Welcome to Listen Here, the audiobook podcast where we bring you chapter listens of our much-loved audiobooks and sometimes special guest appearances. In her first solo memoir, New York Times bestselling author Joanna Gaines invites us on an authentic and deeply vulnerable journey into her story and helps shine a light on the beauty of our own, guiding us to release the weights that hold us back so we may live and share our story in truth. To break free from the negative aspects of her past, Joanna needed to rewrite her story. The deepest part of herself, which had been knocked around and drowned out by the negative beliefs she had let the world convince her about who she really was, came back to the surface. In the stories we tell, Joanna takes us through personal stories to help us learn how to release the weights that can be holding us back so we can live and share our story in truth. The book is an invitation to take stock of the different chapters of our lives, both the good and the bad, and to only carry forward what is valuable and meaningful. Let's hear an exclusive sneak peek of the stories we tell, and remember, every piece of your story matters.
Because this book is my story, and every chapter is a window into who I am, the journey I'm on, and the season I'm in right now, there are themes you'll see constantly, like vulnerability, fear, intentionality, perfectionism. Those are all unique to me. The chapters of your own life will be different. Maybe you won't always relate, or maybe it will feel like you're looking in a mirror. And like me, you might be at the halfway point of your life, or perhaps you're way younger or way older. Whatever we have in common and whatever differences lie between us, I only hope that my story can help shine a light on the beauty of yours, and that my own soul work will stir something of your own. If you're feeling resistant, there's a good chance that you are your own first obstacle. At least that's how it usually works with me. Before you think, I don't want to go there, or who cares about the past, I'd argue that's pain and insecurity creeping in again, trying to persuade you that it's not worth rewriting parts of who you've been so you can live in the fullness of all you truly are. Chapter 5, To Hold and Let Go. As I combed through all the notes I have written in my journal, one caught my eye by the date that was scribbled in the corner. It was about 1.5 years ago, the day Drake got his driver's license. As I started to read what I'd written down that day, I could sense the disbelief in my tone. My first baby, my son who made me a mom, was suddenly 16 years old and about to drive away from Chip and me for the very first time. The part that piqued my interest was toward the end. I mentioned how earlier that day I'd been teaching Crew, our youngest, how to step down the stairs at the house. He was about 2 and getting curious about our staircase, so I wanted to make sure he knew how to safely get down in case he managed to climb a step or 2 on his own. The dichotomy of those two realities occurring on the same day really struck me. It felt like I was letting go of my oldest in one breath, while in the next, the tiny hands of my youngest were holding on tight. I had already been in the headspace of this chapter, thinking that if you've come this far, how could I show you that the point of writing down your story isn't all toil and sadness, slow soul work, and painful journal entries? I mean, that stuff is essential. It's how we grow, but it's also just part 1. It's the prologue to a life you can't wait to write about. And as I sat there, remembering that moment, I started to make a deeper connection. Because, you see, the day we watched our oldest son drive away for the first time, I won't lie, there were a lot of tears. Not from Chip. He was practically chasing Drake down the driveway, cheering him on, while I went back inside to gather myself. It hurt to watch my son leave in such an obvious display of what it looks like to grow out of us. This rite of passage now belonging to him. Yet, as I came back inside the house, I remember finding Crew, standing there as though nothing had changed forever. He was simply wondering if I'd come back in to play with him. I don't know how to explain it other than the light softened and my heart swelled, and at that moment I knew how essential this rhythm is. To lose and then gain. To have and to hold, only to let go. It was a gift of perspective, because there was Crew tugging on my hand to follow him, and it was this beautiful and gracious reminder of the bigger picture, showing me that highs follow lows, that sorrow and joy can go hand in hand, that letting go reveals what else our arms were made to carry. The same holds true for our story. When we write it down, when we hold each piece, we get to see the full picture, the joyful seasons and heartbreaking seasons, and how one led to the other, how essential each is in making us whole. A perspective like this reminds us that life is neither completely merry nor completely tragic, but a little bit of everything all the way to its center. And that without this balancing act, there'd be no tension to move us forward. But we'll have to hold that little bit of everything for a chance at a view of the bigger picture. Without that rhythm, without that grace, we'd have no perspective, no sense of how it all works together to tell a story worthy of each of our journeys. I'm a self-proclaimed hoarder. I have cupboards and drawers overflowing with collections of serveware, linen closets stuffed full, dozens of photo albums. Our barn sometimes doubles as storage for my favorite antiques. I don't let go of things so easily, not when they've meant something to my family, not even when they're no longer serving me. When I think about all we might be holding this year, this month, this moment, it's enough to make me lose my breath. Every season brings with it beauty and goodness, and almost always some difficult and painful things too. Maybe not always in equal measure, but burdens are rarely light, and often what we can't comfortably carry in our arms, we end up pushing onto our backs, offering more space to that which is weighing us down. Inch by inch, day by day, it's impossible to put a name to all you might be holding. For me, it tends to run the gamut. Year by year, month by month, it changes as I do. But some burdens have crippled me more than others. Some heavier weights that I willingly carried for far too long. Pain has been my biggest learning curve. Those playground stories I'd been told and believed about what I should hide and who I should be manifested into insecurities about my worth. Past hurt became a weight that, for the life of me, I could not put down. It was something I might not have admitted to carrying around every day, but now I can see it for what it really was. A silent undercurrent, always there, raging just beneath the surface, veiling all the good that I was holding in a cloud of gray. I know I spent some years trying to hold on tight to any good thing I could get my hands on, hoping that would dim the sadness, the insecurity, the uncertainty. I figured that if there was only good from where I stood, maybe my hurt would disappear. That if I could just hold the happiest pieces of my life the closest, I'd forget that deep down, I didn't always feel worthy of them. Yet bringing them closer only seemed to magnify the moments from my past that convinced me I was undeserving. It took getting up close and personal with that pain, that hurt, for me to see all the good and all the beautiful scenes of my present through clear and contented eyes. Learning how to heal and how to let go of pain and hurt and shame in healthy ways has completely changed the way I view what I'm carrying. I spent too long reaching for safe when the world caught me by surprise, holding fear close to my chest. But figuring out how to work through my pain and put it in its rightful place, recognizing the power it carries to wield empathy, has changed my outlook. This has changed my life. It has changed the potential for what I'm capable of holding in health. In my own life, I've also found guilt and regret to be as clingy as pain. As a mom, a spouse, a daughter, a friend, there are a myriad of ways I've carried guilt over my 44 years. And like pain, guilt is hard to cut loose. It sticks to our hearts, playing navigator to our choices, our sense of goodness, our ability to judge ourselves gently. When it comes to my kids, I've been a working mom their whole lives, but they've never made me feel guilty. That's always been my own doing. When I've had to miss moments of their little lives for something going on at the office, I carry that guilt for a while. Sometimes I try to overcompensate in ways that serve no one well, gripping the wrong things even tighter as a way to reconcile my own feelings of thinking I failed somewhere. I wish I was the only one to carry this burden, but I gather I'm not alone. Because guilt and regret manifest in different ways every day. How could they not in the culture we live in, where efficiency is praised and status is gained by how much we can hold at once? This has made it second nature at times for me to focus on all the areas of my life where I think I'm failing and at all that I'm not able to hold. While I'm grateful for seasons of hard work and heavy loads because they show me what these arms can carry, I know I wasn't made to hold only the hard, only pain and guilt. There is more to me than that, more hope than fear, more joy than sorrow. But toil thrashes and lack lives out loud. If we don't learn to do the hard work of letting these things go, there will never be room in our story for all the beauty it bears. I'm grateful to have found truth on the other side of lies, vulnerability on the other side of fear, empathy on the other side of pain. This is how I know that every season has a purpose, and that holding, even when it leads to letting go, is what clues us into the bigger story being told. If you believe that too, if you can hold your story in truth for all that it is, the good and the bad, not perfect, but whole, if you can see who you are as richer than any past or future thing, that's the perspective we're after. That's also the gift of writing down your story. You view where you've come from, where you stand now, and where you're going, not with weariness or uncertainty, but trust, believing every piece has its purpose. You can look ahead, ready to hold whatever ebbs and flows differently, more contentedly, because you get, with more clarity now, what's been true all along. Our story, it flows like waves. There are parts that crash down on us, moments that dance around our toes, scenes that carry us out to the sea where it's only sun and air, birds and breeze. But for every crash, every break, the tide always comes back to the shore. And as I have read and reread the pages I've written on my life, decades ago, 2 seasons ago, even this morning, I continue to be struck by the resonant truth of the message between the lines on some pages and clear as day on others, that this rhythm is essential. It's where grace is, it's where peace is, but mostly it's where our story lives. I have come to believe that we can learn from nature everything we ought to know about how to live in rhythm. It can be a wise teacher if we're curious enough to watch and learn how it moves, why it blooms in spring, grows wildly during summer, and yields harvest each fall, only to lay bare come winter. Years ago, when planting a garden was only a dream in my mind, I would look out the kitchen window of our home at the empty corner of our yard and see it all in my head. I imagined a garden that was lush and abundant, overflowing with vegetables and herbs and flowers. And, like magic, that's essentially what happened during the first spring, summer, and fall that we began planting. We put in the work, and most everything went as planned. The garden was doing exactly what it was meant to do, growing, thriving, producing. It was as beautiful as I'd pictured it. Then winter settled in, and as should have been expected, everything withered. It came time to pull up all the plants and flowers that we'd grown to love, and the garden lay bare. It occurred to me that this was never a part of the dream. I never really imagined that after months of tending to it and seasons of it overflowing with life, I'd look out at the garden and just see dirt. I'll be honest, I was mad. I kind of bratted out. I wouldn't look out the window for a few weeks, feeling frustrated by this part of the process. All that beauty turned to dust. But that's what happened. And it turns out it's what had to happen for a chance to see it bloom again. I grew to learn how essential this rhythm of rising and falling is for the garden, but also for all of life. For a chance at wholeness, a chance at pursuing the full picture of who I was made to be and to live in the abundance of my story, understanding this part is essential. We need to trust that every piece of our past and our present, the broken, the sad, the hard, just as much as the fulfilled, the good, the happy, plays a role in reaping the harvest of all that we are, that the dirt and dust is how we can know we'll bloom again. This cadence of nature is something I've tried to mirror over the years. Beyond the garden, all around us, nature sings a song of change every 90 days. The world moves to the rhythm of the seasons, sprouting and budding and blooming and dying. Look outside right now. No matter the time of year, you can see how much beauty wouldn't exist if not for the rise and fall of every season that came before. For me, it's summer in Texas, which means the garden always needs watering. I was out there earlier this morning when I noticed my dahlias are beginning to break through the soil, and I almost didn't believe it. So I got closer, and sure enough, it looked like they'd proven me wrong. I'd planted them using tubers from last season's harvest, which isn't something I've done before. If you've never seen a dahlia tuber, they're basically like a clump of dry dirt. I've been growing dahlias in my garden for years, and after they bloom, I've always pulled them out and thrown them away. But last year, someone told me that those tubers can be replanted again as long as they're kept in a dry, dark place. So last summer, after the dahlias died, I pulled them all up and saved the tubers, storing them for the time in the garden shed. Honestly, I had very low expectations that they'd ever be fruitful again. Every time I walked by the crates they were sitting in, I thought to myself, there is no way this works. Well, it turns out those tubers that sat in the dark, neglected for nearly a year, still had all this life to give within them. The garden holds a lot of wisdom about life, and when I see its life cycle play out, growth to rest, scarcity to abundance, I can't help but look closer at the rhythms of my own life. What I've been chasing, where I've been stuck, what might grow abundantly if I was to give it more attention, or on the contrary, if I was to let it grow on its own. What needs to be shed to nurture something entirely new? In time, you can see how our world, simply by its rotation, can become our greatest measure of when to catch and when to release, what to hold and what to let go. If we're paying attention, sometimes we get a heads up. Some things in life come with natural endings, just based on cultural norms we've accepted. Take my oldest son, for instance. Now that he's turning 18, our culture says it's time for him to move on, to go to college, or to get a job. Because we know this is natural law, Chip and I have had a chance to expect this, to plan, to prepare ourselves for it. Same goes for a lot of newness, a job, a relationship, a child. We can expect there will be some growing pains. For some, these rhythms will be welcomed because we know they are nearing. And yet, even the best planners can still feel like they're being robbed of something. Perhaps there have been seasons in your own life when time seems to stretch as wide as an ocean, and then your kid says their first word or takes their first step, and suddenly they're moving out of the house. It rarely matters that you knew it was coming, that you spent weeks holding onto their hand as they learned to be brave one step at a time, and then months looking for where they'd go next as they learned to be brave in a whole new way. It's still a surprise the day it happens, the day you find yourself on the other side of that moment and catch yourself whispering gently, "But wait, hold on, not yet." That's why sometimes when I watch Drake drive away from the house, a cloud of dust trailing behind him, I'll reach for Crew's hand, grateful that I still can. Other moments don't allow for planning at all. Life simply chooses to catch us off guard. When it comes to the death of a loved one or an unexpected fallout of a relationship, when it comes to surprise endings, the world doesn't always play fair. But then we see the sun rising again, the waves rolling in again. We can await the beauty that grows from tragedy, the bloom that follows the dust, because it's still a rhythm, just one we don't always want to recognize. What I'm trying to say is that some of life will be predictable, but much of it won't. Sometimes letting go will hurt, but that's how we have a frame of reference. That's how we learn to pull close the things we want to hold. My sister Mikey is only 2 years younger than me, so our lives have always followed a similar cadence that made it natural to dream about building our families and our futures side by side. A year after Chip and I were married, Mikey and her new husband, David, moved in next door. And like clockwork, we both had our first kids a year apart, and for a while we shared a backyard and babysitters and meals 3 or 4 times a week. We loved making plans and never considered the other wouldn't be a part of every single one of them. We envisioned our kids running around and playing together. We imagined taking trips with our families. It came as a surprise when Mikey told me that David wanted to apply to medical school, which meant schooling and residency that would take them out of state. When Mikey left, it felt like a loss of something. Part of me, I think. She's told me that she felt a hole in her heart too. For 10 years, our lives carried on. Our families grew. We saw one another 2 or 3 times a year, mostly at the births of our babies. They moved a few times for David's residency while Chip and I were growing our business. We started and ended Fixer Upper before Mikey moved back. It's a little sad to think of all the life we missed together during that stretch of time. But when they moved their family back to Waco, just about 10 minutes down the road from us, all those dreams we'd once held started to come true. Our kids were older, but quickly became best friends. We shared meals and babysitters the same way we used to. But more than that, we also got to share in who the other grew up to be. In that absence, Mikey and I carved out identities for ourselves as wives, as mothers, as women that we'd never really been able to do when our lives were so intertwined. We got to learn about each other again in a way that felt like a gift. They've been back for 5 years now, but Mikey's still surprising me today. A lot of unexpected joy and closeness has come from that hole that was left in our hearts. And it's reminding me again that letting go doesn't have to be the way a story ends. There's almost always something redeeming lying in wait. There's a lot of comfort to be found in rhythm, a lot of predictability and beauty, but the nature of ebb and flow calls for a lot of disruptions too. Unexpected letting go, but also things we suddenly find ourselves holding. Surprising news, problems to solve, spilled coffees, burned dinners, a to-do list that only grows, things that pile high so quickly, and it can block our view to all that we're trying to hold at once. Looking back on the 5 years we were on Fixer Upper, I remember the day the show got picked up, and I remember our last day of filming. But the middle, that part was a blur. I don't fully know why. It could have been busyness, could have been distractions, could have been a temporary desire to get through it as quickly as possible. It could have been the fact that we were in shock. On one hand, we felt undeserving and a little disoriented, and on the other, we were completely caught off guard by how wildly and quickly it was turning our lives upside down. For as fun and exhilarating and exciting as those years were, there was equal confusion, uncertainty, maybe even a little fear about the direction this would take our family. Either way, it's made me wonder if I would have done anything differently had I held those years closer, had I fully embraced every high and every low, every bend and attempt to balance. I wonder if I'd be able to look back on that stretch of time and glean more wisdom from it. As I look ahead at life's next turn, this time I want to know intimately what I hold in my hands. I want to choose to dwell deeply in the things I'm carrying now, letting go of what is no longer serving my life and my family in order to make space for everything that is. Not all rhythms will follow a natural order. We aren't always at the mercy of time when it comes to things we should hold and that which we need to let go. Sometimes it will be completely up to us. In those moments, I have learned to trust my soul. When we ultimately decided to take a break from Fixer Upper, Chip and I must have heard 100 different rumors about why we would choose to take a step back when the show was at its peak. Our decision looked, to many, to be so countercultural, it was difficult for them to believe that we were simply following what had been stirring in our soul, that we needed to be done, that our family needed a break. Sure, there were a lot of really good reasons it wasn't the smartest move career-wise, but we weren't listening to our brains. We were listening to that deepest chamber of our hearts, even if it didn't make complete sense to anyone else. I am a firm believer that the more attuned we are at the soul level, not our gut, not our mind, not even solely our heart, but all three working in harmony, the easier it is to sense when it's time to reconsider what we're carrying. Other times it's a matter of simply listening. Not everything we want to hold wants to be held by us. It sounds a little harsh, but I've seen this play out in my own life. Certain projects I'm passionate about go nowhere for months on end, something about it not being ready or right, and until I release those expectations, I'm really just running in place. I see this in plans we make for ourselves, for our families too, even the way we show up for our children. My kids are all getting older and need me to show up for them in different ways than I've relied on for years. Rhythm can be found in parenthood too, I'm learning. And the people in our lives are usually telling us or showing us what they need if we're paying attention. If we're routinely asking ourselves, what are my kids, my spouse, my friends, what are they asking for? What are they needing? I've heard it said that at any given time, humans are doing one of two things. They're either crying out for love or they're showing it. I take that to mean that we're simultaneously looking for something to hold and something to give away. Determining what we need, but also what we have to give, is kind of like finding our sweet spot, our own way of recognizing that not every season should look just one way, but a balance of highs and lows, of loss that leads to discovery, of sacrifice that pushes towards strength. There is wisdom in knowing that if there's something we want to commit ourselves to, that often means that something else has to give. I'm not just talking about career moves or saying yes to opportunities, but with people, ideas, and theories, lies we've told ourselves, truths that we've missed, whatever is using up the space in our souls where it shouldn't, whether it's taken up residence for too long or simply doesn't belong, because now we know it's taking the place of something else, something beautiful we want to carry instead. More than any other season of my life, I'm also learning that sometimes good things need to be let go. That the time will come when something we've carried for a while, even something we've loved holding, will need space of its own for a chance at growth. If we can embrace the perspective this tension offers, balancing the story of each season, that's how we get to see the bigger picture. How can we shoulder a quiet confidence that reminds us that the things we hold today, whether it's pain or sorrow, happiness or hope, aren't meant to be carried forever? So we learn to let them matter while they're ours and to let them go when the time is right. And here's what I'm learning too. If I don't pay attention to what I'm holding, if I'm not the one who chooses what I carry, I'll miss the best parts. Because the world is loud and fast, and pain can sting more than beauty. Heartbreak can leave a bigger mark than joy. We tend to remember the storm more than the calm, but I know that's not an accurate picture of the life you and I are tending to. My best advice? Well, the thing that's working for me now is to simply pick up what you can't or no longer want to carry forward with you and say, thank you for what you taught me, and then let it go. And then pick up what's still true and say, thank you for what you're still showing me, and hold on tight. So that even when the world forces our hand, we learn to let go on good terms, not wasting our energy on anger or resentment or fear, even grief over what we've lost, but to spend it on joy and hope and gratitude for what we had. Think about all that sits in your own arms, be it pain, sorrow, sadness that's weighing you down, but also just the opposite, joys, freedom, a lightness today that's lifting you up. There's a good chance your life right now paints a picture of both. Just as there's a good chance you see this dichotomy at play in more corners of your world, balancing the tension between chaos on one side and still waters on the other. We are never flourishing on all fronts, yet never burning from all sides either. I think it's good we remember that. Some of us will seek balance by trying to hold on to everything, whether we're aware of it or not. But the reality is, we can't be everywhere at once. We can't be everything to everyone. While sometimes I am capable, able-bodied, and strong on multiple fronts, other times I need to step back and delegate, let go of some stuff, and really rest. Every season looks different, and each one is no less significant than the other, not when each matters to the story you're writing. It isn't always instantaneous, knowing what you should be letting go of or holding on to. There are the obvious ones, the things that, more than anything in your life, you care to do right by. Your kids, your partner, your family, close friends, possibly even the thing you're most passionate about. But the quieter ones, the secret fears and doubts that hold you back, those I call the silent overshadowers, and they can be harder to smoke out. It takes patience and steadiness, and we as humans tend to have a discomfort with quiet and with slow. But if life is about not what we carry, but how we've held it in the end, it seems to me that even the rhythm of patience is essential. Patience with sorting out what you have to let go of and what is worth holding tightly to. We likely have a list of things we're holding that are doing us more harm than good. Pain, guilt, regret, and self-protection seem to be a part of human nature, but so is seeking revision and meaning for our lives. More than what we're afraid of, I believe is a desire that the imprint we leave on this world would be significant, to hope that how we use the time we're given would be worthy of the opportunity. If that resonates with you, find comfort in the gracious reality that all of us get to write each and every chapter of the story our lives will tell. Despite the setbacks, despite the rhythms that don't flow our way, despite the world spinning, we still get to hold every chapter. We still get a chance to write and rewrite whatever we'd like. The pen is ours, even when it doesn't feel that way. Being a good steward of our story means trusting that how we cultivate our lives today will matter for who we become tomorrow, weaving together the old and the new, the parts of who we've been with who we are still evolving into. Some things you'll be relieved to be rid of. Other things, the good, the beautiful, you may resist. And yet this rhythm is essential too. It's how we can paint the full picture of our lives. It's how we tell the whole story. Not just the bits and the pieces that shine, but all of it. Every beautiful and imperfect piece. Because this is how we can know that healing follows hurt, that joy follows sorrow, that hope follows fear, and how we can know that if we feel we're stuck in one, we're never far from the other. I don't know what the rhythms of your life look like, but I hope that as you work to create new ones, you'll prioritize the things of life that you're longing to write about. Not just the pain and the sorrow and the misunderstandings, but also the happy, the hopeful, the tender moments that seek no attention, though you still give them yours. A story that trusts that what's on the other side of one ending is a new beginning. Because the one thing we do know is that no rhythm lasts forever. When one is disrupted, another one fills its place. Let's choose the rhythms that move us forward, toward the flow of gratitude and hopeful expectation. Let's find strength in the way they shape us.
Do you love books? Of course you do. That's why you're here. So we want to let you in on our secret book club BFF, Page Chaser. Page Chaser is an online community for book lovers. From fiction, self-care, spirituality, and more, they're here to bring you what's bingeable and quizable. Page Chaser's community is constantly working to fill your TBR list. Follow their blog, sign up for their newsletter, or check out their Instagram lives, stories, and reels for sneak peeks and join in on the fun. Everything from new releases, deals, and monthly giveaways, there's something for every book lover at Page Chaser. Connect with Page Chaser on Facebook, follow them on Instagram at page.chaser, or sign up for their newsletter at pagechaser.com and let them know what you love reading. Now tell us, do you dog ear? We're not done yet. The Magnolia Story is the first book from Chip and Joanna, offering their fans a detailed look at their life together. From the very first renovation project they ever tackled together, to the project that nearly cost them everything, from the childhood memories that shaped them, to the twists and turns that led them to the life they share on the farm today. They open up to their fans in a way we've never seen before. Let's hear an excerpt from the Magnolia Story.
1. First dates and second chances. To this day, I am still not sure what it was about Chip Gaines that made me give him a second chance, because basically our first date was over before it even started. I was working at my father's Firestone automotive shop the day we first met. I'd worked as my dad's office manager through my years at Baylor University and was perfectly happy working there afterward while I tried to figure out what I really wanted to do with my life. The smell of tires, metal, and grease, that place was like a second home to me, and the guys in the shop were all like my big brothers. On this particular afternoon, they all started teasing me. "You should go out to the lobby, Joe. There's a hot guy out there. Go talk to him," they said. "No," I said. "Stop. I'm not going to do that." I was all of 23 and I wasn't exactly outgoing.
She was a bit awkward, there's no doubt about that.
I hadn't dated all that much and I'd never really had a serious relationship, nothing that lasted longer than a month or two. I'd always been an introvert and still am, believe it or not. I was also very picky, and I just wasn't the type of girl who struck up conversations with guys I didn't know. I was honestly comfortable being single. I didn't think that much of it. "Who is this guy, anyway?" I asked, since all of them seemed to know him for some reason. "Oh, they call him Hot John," someone said, laughing. Hot John? There's no way I was going to go out in the lobby to strike up a conversation with some guy called Hot John, but the guys wouldn't let up, so I finally said, fine. I gathered up a few things from my desk, in case I needed a backup plan, and rounded the corner into the lobby. I quickly realized that Hot John was pretty good looking. He'd obviously just finished a workout, he was dressed head to toe in cycling gear, and was just standing there, innocently waiting on someone from the back. I tried to think about what I might say to strike up a conversation when I got close enough and quickly settled on the obvious topic, cycling. But just as that thought raced through my head, he looked up from his magazine and smiled right at me. Crap, I thought. I completely lost my nerve. I kept on walking right past him and out the lobby's front door. When I reached the safety of my dad's outdoor waiting area, I realized just how bad I needed the fresh air. I sat on a chair a few down from another customer and immediately started laughing at myself. Did I really just do that? "Hey, what's so funny?" the customer sitting near me asked. I looked up at him, and before I could even answer, he asked, "Wait, aren't you the girl from the commercials?" "Yeah, that's me," I said, still embarrassed for my awkward encounter with Hot John. I was, in fact, the girl from the commercials. I had some interest in television news. I'd even done an internship with CBS in New York City working under Dan Rather in the news division. And because of that, my dad had insisted I go on camera for the local TV ads he ran for his shop. I was so caught up in my own thoughts that I didn't even get a good look at this guy who had started talking to me. He was wearing a baseball cap and seemed like an average customer. He seemed around my age, maybe a bit older. That was all I really noticed. What did strike me was that he was real chatty, so we wound up sitting there for 20 minutes just shooting the breeze. Over the course of our conversation, he told me he was a Baylor grad. That struck me as odd. The guys I'd known at Baylor were more the clean-cut type. This guy seemed a little rough and tumble, the kind who'd rather work with his hands than keep a corporate calendar. But right off the bat, I could tell he was smart and definitely hardworking. He was just at the shop getting the brakes fixed on his truck. I also found it interesting that he'd stuck around Waco after graduation. "I love this town," he said. "I'm planning to stay in Waco until God makes it clear I'm supposed to move on." That surprised me too. I love the way he mentioned God in a way that was so unguarded, and I like that he wanted to stay in Waco. That was rare for Baylor grads. Normally people ship themselves straight off to the big cities after graduation. Speaking of, that whole week I had been debating whether or not to move back to New York City to pursue my dream of broadcast journalism. Most of my friends and family were encouraging me to go, and I was really wrestling with it. It occurred to me that this could be my one big chance, but I also really liked it right here where I was. All of a sudden, Hot John walked out and said, "Hey, Chip, let's go." I was confused. The man I'd been chatting with, who apparently was named Chip, explained that John was his roommate and that the two of them were business partners. Oh, of course these two had come together. I was still completely embarrassed about my initial encounter with Hot John. But I said, "Hi," and then thankfully this Chip went right back to our conversation as Hot John took a seat and joined in. Chip asked me about New York and what I wanted to do and how long my dad had owned the shop and what it was I loved about Waco. He asked about my sisters and my family in general and what I'd done at Baylor and if I'd known a few communication majors he'd run around with at school. I told y'all he was chatty. Somehow none of these questions seemed intrusive or strange to me at the time, which is funny because thinking back I find them particularly telling. At the time, it was just like talking with an old friend. John finally stood up and this baseball cap-wearing customer that John had introduced as Chip followed. "Well, nice talking to you," he said. "Nice talking to you too," I replied, and that was it. I went back inside. The guys in the shop wanted to know what I thought about Hot John, and I just laughed. Sorry, guys. I don't think it's going to work out. The next day, I came back for my lunch break to find a note on my desk. Chip Gaines called. Call him back. I thought, oh, well, that must be the guy I met yesterday. So I called him. I honestly thought he was going to ask me about getting a better price on his brakes or something, but instead he said, "Hey, I really enjoyed our conversation yesterday. I was wondering, you want to go out sometime?" And for some reason, I said okay, just like that, without any hesitation. It wasn't like me at all. When I hung up the phone, I went, what in the world just happened?
So you said okay immediately? I don't remember it like that. That's fun. No reservations. I must have been good looking.
What Chip didn't know was I didn't even give myself time to have reservations. Something told me to just go for it.
Cute, Joey. This story makes me love you all over again.
My parents were out of town that week, but I remember calling to tell them. I'm going on a date with a customer that was getting his brakes done. I met him yesterday. I guess it's unusual for a 23-year-old to call her parents and tell them she's going on a date, but it was normal for me. I was extremely close to my parents, and I was just excited to tell them. My parents and my little sister, Mary Kay, whom I call Mikey, asked me what this Chip guy looked like. And I said, I honestly can't tell you. He had a baseball cap on, and the way we were sitting, I didn't really get a good look at him. When the night of our big date came, I was giddy and a bit anxious. I got ready at my sister's apartment. She and her roommates, Sarah and Katie, were all there for moral support, and Chip was supposed to pick me up at 6. 6 rolls around, no Chip. Then 6:30, still no Chip. I thought, well, maybe he thought the date was at 7, so I gave him the benefit of the doubt. But when 7 came and went, I was officially done. Finally, at 7:30, a full 90 minutes later, he knocked at the door. Don't even answer it, I whispered to my friends. I don't want to go anywhere with this idiot. But we want to see what he looks like, they said, and so one of them finally opened the door while I hung back out of sight. Well, hello, ladies, Chip said as he pushed his way into the apartment. I could tell that he charmed every one of them in about 2 seconds flat. I finally decided to step out and at least take a look at him. He was not like I remembered at all. This guy had no hair. I'd imagined he had hair under the baseball cap, but nope, just stubble. And his face was weathered and flushed red like he'd been working outside in the hot sun all day long. He was wearing a reddish toned leather jacket too, and I thought, is this red guy the same guy I was talking to at the shop? It turned out that Chip had shaved his head to support a friend of his who was battling cancer.
Yeah, a bunch of us had gotten together. We all shaved our heads for this good friend of mine. It was growing back, but it was not quite past the buzz cut at this point.
I still don't remember what he'd said that convinced me to walk out the door with him. He didn't even have a plan for a date. He said, "So, Joanna, where do you want to go eat?" He didn't even apologize for being late either. He had so much confidence. I don't know. I can't explain it. Only Chip can be an hour and a half late and have no one mad about it.
I wasn't an hour and a half late. She's making that up. I was like maybe 15 or 20 minutes late, max.
Chip was an hour and a half late to everything. If I'd known that then, maybe I wouldn't have taken it personally.
Well, I think you're wrong about that. You're definitely cute, though, and you do have me on the no plans thing. That was bad. I don't even know what I was thinking. I just never had any plans. I liked the way things were when they would work themselves out. It seemed to be more fun that way. I wasn't nervous about the date or where to eat, and I certainly wasn't nervous about being late.
Out in his truck, Chip asked me again where I'd like to eat, so I suggested a place out in Valley Mills, a small town about 30 minutes from Waco, which looking back was a gutsy move for a first date. 30 minutes was a long time to be in a car if you ran out of things to talk about. But there was a restaurant there in a historic mansion where my parents liked to go. It was really charming, and it was the first place that popped into my head.
The whole drive over there was kind of like a dream for me. Jo wasn't anything like the girls I'd typically went out with. She was definitely cute, you know. We wound up driving out of town through these backwoods roads. I didn't even know where in the heck we were going. We came up to this mansion with these gorgeous pillars in the front, looked like something you'd see out of Gone with the Wind. Everything was going about like I'd expect until we sat down at this table and the owner of the restaurant came over. Everywhere I went in Dallas or Waco, somebody always came up, knew me, talking to me. So I thought maybe this guy was coming over to say hi. Turns out he wasn't coming to talk to me at all. He was coming over here to talk to Joanna. "Hey, sweetheart, how you doing?" he said. "I saw your latest commercial. Tell your mom and dad I said hello, okay?" They talked for quite a while, and my mind started turning like, wow. What is this girl, a local superstar?
Dinner was perfect. We were both comfortable with each other for some reason, and the conversation came easy. When the bill came, Chip quickly popped up and took a big roll of cash out of his pocket. I don't think I'd ever seen anyone carry that much cash. My dad was successful, but he kept his money in a bank. Seeing that, I thought, oh, that's why he stayed in Waco. He's doing really well for himself.
You thought I was rich? What you didn't know was that was probably all the money I had in the world. I always carried cash. I liked to carry like $1,000 at a time on me in those days. I just loved the way it felt. Plus, I worked with a lot of rough dudes, and sometimes these guys expected to be paid in cash. It's funny because I went to Baylor, where I was surrounded by all these rich kids from these rich, beautiful families, and for whatever reason, I was never really drawn to that. I was always more comfortable hanging out with the guys who dug ditches. You know, I lived like them too, whether it was carrying around all the money I had in the world in my pocket or sitting under some shade tree at lunchtime while they all laughed at me while I was trying to eat jalapenos.
After dinner, the two of us went and sat on that grand front porch for a while. It was a beautiful night, and I could have just sat there and listened to the silence. But Chip, of course, he had other ideas. I just looked at him until I couldn't even hear him anymore. I remember thinking, nope, this guy isn't even close to done. In my head, I started to go down the checklist we women put together in our heads and our hearts. I'd always been attracted to people with dark hair. He was blonde or redheaded or something in between. It was too short to tell. I would have preferred hair, period. I'd always been attracted to quiet guys, too, which I knew was a problem because the quiet guys never had the nerve to ask me out, and they certainly never drew me out the way this guy did. Still, he was all over the place. He was talking about the businesses he'd started and those ideas he had and how he was buying up little houses and flipping them and renting some out to Baylor students, and I was wondering if this guy was just a bit crazy. I like stability. I like safety. I like traditional, and I like being on time. And this guy with this beet red face wasn't any of those things. I did think he was kind of fascinating, though. I know this is going to sound strange to some people, but right in the middle of that, right in the middle of me trying to figure this guy out, a little voice in my head said, "That's the man you're going to marry." I swear to you, it was as clear as day. It seemed like the voice of God, or maybe it was some deep intuition, but I heard it. In fact, I heard it so loudly that I completely tuned out our conversation and lost focus. My roommates asked me a million questions after he dropped me off that night. What was he like? Did he try to kiss you? How was the date? And my response was that it was good. We had fun. He was a good talker. And no, he didn't try to kiss me. I didn't tell them about that voice in my head. It seemed far too ridiculous. But honestly, if it wasn't for that voice, I'm not sure I would have stuck it out through all the ups and downs of dating a guy like Chip. I was spinning a bit, but I certainly didn't fall instantly head over heels for him or anything like that.
It wasn't exactly love at first sight for me either. It was a fun date, but I'd been on a lot of fun dates. Something was different, though. Joanna really impressed me. I couldn't stop thinking about that owner coming over and talking to her. I honestly was the one who normally got the attention. She was totally different from the typical blonde-haired, blue-eyed cheerleader type that I'd usually dated. But the more I thought about her, the more I knew I definitely wanted to see her again.
We made plans to go get coffee the following week, but I had to cancel. I hurt my back. In fact, I needed to go into the hospital for surgery, and I let Chip know that. He seemed real concerned and wished me luck, and then he didn't call me again. He didn't send flowers to the hospital, nothing.
Flowers to the hospital? After one date?
Yes, that would have been the chivalrous thing to do. Everyone thought it was rude that you didn't call after that.
Huh. Well, I definitely apologize. I didn't even think about that.
It's okay. I forgive you. I think it turned out okay in the end. Even though he wasn't what I'd pictured as the type of man I might be interested in, there was just something about Chip Gaines I couldn't get off my mind. I kept thinking about him and thinking about just how weird it all was. Our first date happened at the end of October, and it wasn't until after the turn of the new year, early January something, that I finally got another phone call from him. "Hey, Joe, I just wanted to say that I really enjoyed our date, and I think we ought to stop playing all these games," he said. I was just sitting there thinking, what games is this guy talking about?
I'd made a bet with Hot John to see who could hold out the longest before we'd call our dates back. I really wanted that $50 from John. That's the only reason I didn't call.
I think Chip was still dating a few girls off and on then.
Yeah, I'm sure you're right about that. But I did want to win that $50. And it was killing me because I kept thinking about you, and I kept thinking to myself, she's going to call any day now.
"There's a basketball game tonight. Would you like to go?" Chip asked me. Once again, without hesitation, I said yes, and from that night on, Chip and I started seeing each other almost every day. He would come by the tire shop to visit. He met my parents. I met his parents. I went out and drove around with him to see some of the properties he'd worked on and to meet some of the guys he'd worked with in his landscaping business. One guy, Malesio, was like a brother to Chip. I had never seen someone bond so closely to the people he worked with. After a while, I even offered to help him do some of the books for the little business he was running, and he took me up on it. I'd never been around that kind of work before, but I thought it was fun. I thought he was fun. About 4 months into it, we were shooting hoops in my dad's driveway when Chip stopped in his tracks, held me in his arms, looked into my eyes under the starry sky, and said, "I love you." And I looked at him and said, "Thank you." "Thank you?" Chip said. I know I should have said, "I love you too," but this whole thing had been such a whirlwind, and I was just trying to process it all. No guy had ever told me he loved me before, and here Chip was saying it after what seemed like such a short period of time. Chip got angry. He grabbed his basketball from under my arm and went storming off with it like a 4-year-old.
I really thought, what in the world is wrong with this girl? I just told her I loved her, and that's all she's got to say. I didn't throw those words around lightly either. It's not like I run around saying that to everyone. So I'm saying it was a big deal for me too. But now I'm stomping down the driveway going, okay, that's it. I feel like I'm dating an emotionless cyborg or something like that. I'm going home.
Chip took off in his big white Chevy truck with Z71 stickers on the side, even squealing his tires a bit as he drove off, and it really sank in what a big deal that must have been for him. I felt bad, so bad that I actually got up the courage to call him later that night. I explained myself, and he said he understood, and by the end of the phone call, we were right back to being ourselves. 2 weeks later, when Chip said, "I love you," again, I responded, "I love you too." There was no hesitation. I knew I loved him, and I knew it was okay to say so. I'm not sure why I ever gave him a second chance when he showed up 90 minutes late for our first date, or why I gave him a second chance when he didn't call me for 2 months after that. And I'm not sure why he gave me a second chance after I blew that romantic moment in the driveway. But I'm very glad I did, and I'm very glad he did too, because sometimes second chances lead to great things. All of my doubts, all of the things I thought I wanted out of a relationship, and many of the things I thought I wanted out of life itself turned out to just be plain wrong. Instead, that voice from our first date turned out to be the thing that was absolutely right. 2. New directions. The first year Chip and I dated turned out to be my year of letting go of the notion that my life was going to be predictable in any way, shape, or form. By his mid-20s, Chip had already been through a whole series of different businesses. Every time I thought I'd heard it all, he would tell me about something else he'd done to earn a buck.
Like in college, I sold these Scantron forms. Those things are these answer cards that you use when filling out certain types of tests. The teachers were able to run them through the machines, and that sort of sped up the grading process. Students at Baylor had to buy these Scantrons and bring them with them to class, but hardly anyone ever remembered to do that. So before the test, the teacher would sit down up front and say, whoever didn't bring their Scantron, 2/3 of the class would raise their hand. She would sell them these Scantron forms for about $2 a piece. This was kind of a slap on the wrist to say, because at the bookstore, they only cost about a dime each. So I went to the bookstore and I bought a whole bunch of these things, and the next time she offered to sell some, I stood up and said, "Mine are only $1." I had so many people buy a Scantron that day, I walked out feeling pretty good about myself. After all, I was a business major. I thought that move should have earned me an instant A. I also sold books for a company called Southwestern Book Company for 2 summers in college. It was a program where you were sent to a town, usually pretty far away from home. Your first objective was to convince people that you'd never met before to put you up for the summer, for free. And then you'd walk around this town selling books door to door. I'm telling you, that job changed my perspective as a college student. If you sold a lot of books, you could make a lot of money. And because of the setup, you had really low overhead. The downside was that it was a ton of work and it was really far from home. Most kids weren't willing to do any of that. I only spent about $3 a day on a sandwich and some eggs. So all of the money that I made literally went into my pocket. If I'd been a lifeguard or maybe waited tables over the summer, I would have wound up going out with all my buddies and spending half the money that I was making. But doing that program was almost like being sent to an island somewhere where all you did was literally work and sleep, and I got really good at it. I remember reading about work on these Alaskan fishing boats, where if things turned out, you could earn north of $6,000 a month. It was grueling, sometimes potentially dangerous stuff, but with no overhead, the money literally was all yours. These were the kind of things I'd sit and think about while I was in class. I realized most people don't want to do a lot of things that it takes to do that kind of work. I made up my mind right then and there, I would do whatever it took to be successful. The second summer, in the middle of selling books, I went to East Texas to open up a fireworks stand. You can only sell fireworks in Texas during this 2-week period before 4th of July. So I took the money I earned from half a summer's worth of selling books, and I bought the fireworks stand inventory. This probably seemed like a boneheaded move to my parents, but I'd heard there was really good money in it. My friend Eric and I went in on these stands together, and it was not easy, no doubt about that, but I earned a ton of money. It was like my first experience with investing. I did that the next 2 summers as well, opening 3 or 4 stands in East Texas. And my friend's uncle, whom I refer to as Uncle Ricky, played a huge role in all of that. From selling books, I knew and enjoyed hard work and the thrill of selling. But it was Uncle Ricky who really recognized the entrepreneur in me and encouraged me to follow that dream. There was something about the way Ricky would say, "Chip, you can do this," that made me believe I really could do it. He really believed in me and kind of trained me to some extent about simple business practices like paying taxes, understanding asset versus liabilities. I took all that experience and I used it to open up a lawn mowing business, which quickly expanded into a full landscaping business with employees, equipment, clients. Then I got the idea to buy some cheap properties on 3rd Street in Waco, on the other side of the track for sure, but within a mile or so of Baylor campus, so I could rent them out to incoming college students. Man, I was rocking and rolling. I certainly wasn't inventing Facebook or anything like that, but I was definitely what you would call a serial entrepreneur.
Chip's experimentation with lots of different kinds of businesses had eventually evolved into flipping houses. By the time we met, he'd successfully done it for a few years. Flipping seemed to be his thing. I have to say, it quickly became my favorite venture of his, too. When explaining to my friends and family what Chip did, I was always a little at a loss. He wasn't a realtor, at least people would have been able to understand that, and I'd never known a career could be made out of buying and selling houses. So even though I spent a lot of my time with Chip kind of playing catch-up to understand it all, it was exciting to me. As I said before, Chip was a smart guy. Unconventional maybe, but he always had the entrepreneurial spirit and business sense to back it up. I was intrigued by this lifestyle of his, maybe because it was wildly different from the safe world I grew up in. Every day seemed to bring a new adventure because Chip really did refuse to be put in the 9-to-5 box people filed themselves into after college graduation. Even when things got complicated, Chip remained fearless. It seemed as if nothing could stop him, and I was hooked. I think that's why when we were first dating in our 20s, we were doing things most people our age weren't doing. Before he'd ever graduated from college, Chip had already figured out the game. Banking, negotiations, selling, all of it. Most people in college are studying and dating, and Chip was certainly doing his fair share of that, but mostly he spent his time thinking, what's the next business I can get into? In that regard, he was kind of a step ahead of a lot of our peers. By the time I started helping him with his properties, Chip was known as the unofficial mayor of 3rd Street. He owned a bunch of tiny little houses along this stretch of road that was also home to a school for troubled youth. Before he came in and fixed up some of the old houses to rent to Baylor students, a lot of people in Waco just steered clear of 3rd Street. But Chip was his fearless self and saw the area as a spot full of underpriced properties with potential. The kids at the school were young, and there was something about that age group that made Chip think he still had time to make a difference. He would cruise up and down that street on his four-wheeler, checking on the progress at various properties and checking in to make sure the tenants didn't need anything. And when he saw those kids walking by after school, he'd get into conversations and joke around with them. He wound up convincing a few of those kids to help out doing lawns and odd jobs on the properties he owned, and he paid them well, which ended up making him a pretty popular guy with them. It seemed that every time he'd give one a job, 4 more would show up the next day, ready to earn a little money. It was inspiring to watch him work and see how well he got along with everyone from his crew, to his clients, to those kids, to Uncle Ricky, whom he introduced me to early on. An interesting side note, Ricky and his wife made a hobby of importing antiques from Europe. They turned their little backyard into an absolute oasis full of old metal and wooden architectural pieces that he built into the landscape. And every time we went over there, the backyard had some new feature added to it. It was like walking from an ordinary Texas front porch into an exotic vacation every time you walked out the back door. I remember thinking, even back then, I would love to do something like that someday. So when Chip asked me to help him out that first summer we were dating, as he repainted and generally got his properties fixed up before the new Baylor students arrived in the fall, I was happy to do it. I didn't know anything about interior design or construction. I'd been a communications major, but I was more than content being its gopher.
To be honest with you, I didn't know any more about interior design or construction than Joe did. I learned this literally on the fly. If I needed to put a fence in or anything like that for that matter, I would just figure out how to do it, get my hands dirty and figure it out. Everything I did was sort of that way. That was the story of my life.
I was still working at my dad's shop, too, but it was fun for me to see Chip's collection of little houses get all cleaned up. I liked thinking about the students who would soon be living in them and remembering what it felt like when I moved into my first apartment. I wanted to make sure everything was right for those kids. Most of the houses weren't much bigger than 800 square feet, so there wasn't a lot to work with. But I quickly saw how new carpet or a fresh paint color could change the whole atmosphere in a house that small. I liked the feeling of getting these jobs done and then watching the way those kids and their parents would go nuts as they were moving in. There was something rewarding about that kind of work. Even if it was something as simple as painting one room, each project had a beginning, middle, and end. You could stand back and actually see what you'd accomplished at the end of the day, and there was something very satisfying in that for me. On top of how much fun it was just to watch Chip do his thing and try to imagine what he might do next. It was more than just business. With Chip, it was everything. He was wild at heart, really. If you'd ever try to give him a rule, he would break it. If you gave Chip a boundary, he would cross it. Chip was just Chip. There was no box for this guy.
There's this movie, it's called Legends of the Fall, where this character named Tristan goes off into these wild places. I've always thought of myself in that kind of way.
And, case in point, the things that would come out of his mouth were unlike anything anyone else would ever think to say. Sometimes it would take me a second to figure out whether he was joking or drop dead serious. He kept me on my toes, and I liked it. Chip was also extremely kind and giving. I swear every time we'd see a homeless guy, Chip would stop and talk to him. Sometimes he'd give him money. Sometimes he'd give him a job the next day. Heck, if the weather was bad, he'd even put him up in a hotel. We'd be walking downtown and I'd hear, "Chip! Hey, Chip!" And I'd turn to see a person approaching us who, frankly, might have scared me if I was walking downtown by myself. Chip wouldn't be scared. He'd know the guy by name. "James, how's it going, brother?" It seemed as if every homeless guy in Waco knew Chip Gaines. On the flip side, every banker in Waco knew Chip too, and he talked to those two very different groups of people exactly the same way. There was never any difference in Chip's demeanor. His enthusiasm for life and work and people was just infectious, and he surprised me with it again and again. At least once a day I caught myself thinking, wow, this guy. Best of all, as happy as Chip Gaines was, he seemed happiest around me.
I'm a generally happy person. My mom always jokes that I was a happy baby, but it's a fact. I was always the happiest around Joe, and I think I still am.
One pretty amazing thing that we learned early on was that the more time we spent together, the better our relationship was. I think a lot of couples feel the need to get away from each other every now and then, to take little breaks, and they came back after a girl's weekend or a guy's fishing trip or something, all refreshed and happy to reconnect because they missed each other. We were just the opposite, and still are. We seem to give each other energy. We function better together than we do apart, and I don't think either one of us have ever felt the urge to say, "I need a break from you." Don't get me wrong. We've certainly had our share of disappointment and arguments, but we just always wanted to tackle our issues together. The two of us never talked about marriage during the first year we were together, but I knew pretty quickly that we were in this for the long haul, and I almost had to convince myself that it was okay to be in love with this man. I kept reminding myself, with Chip, my life isn't going to look like what I thought it was going to look like, but there will be adventure and there will be some fun. My parents were the type of people who locked their doors and had an alarm system. For my whole life, they encouraged me to go after what I wanted, to get a good education, even to go to New York for that internship. But they also encouraged me to use caution, and I did. Chip was the polar opposite. For example, whenever we went out shopping or to restaurants, he would leave his keys in the car. Who leaves their keys in the car in today's world? It was a real problem for us for a while because my first instinct when I got out of the car was to lock the doors. So we'd come back after dinner and realize I'd locked Chip's keys in the car again.
I remember that. In college, I wouldn't just leave my keys in the car. Literally, I would forget and leave it running. What's ironic about Joe and my parents is Joe's parents were pretty much hippies in their younger years. Her dad served in Vietnam, and he was this tall, quiet, lanky guy with glasses. Now, her mom was this vivacious Korean woman who just loved life. They both have the best stories. When I first saw pictures of the two of them before Joe was born, they looked like John Lennon and Yoko Ono. They were right in the thick of all that went on during the 60s. But despite that youthful rebellion, they turned out to be kind of cautious parents who were concerned with traditions and playing it safe. My parents both grew up in a little bitty town called Archer City, Texas, and they were straight as an arrow. But when they left the garage, they left it open, and I mean all day, even when they were out. They wouldn't even think about locking doors. My mom saw an upside to everything, and I think that's part of what made me so optimistic and adventuresome. I have to say, I was very thankful that Joe's parents were all right with us being together. They could have said, this guy is not going to work and you need to move in a different direction. And honestly, Joe was so obedient that just for the sake of responsibility or obligation or whatever you want to call it, she might have broken it off. But her parents, even early on, were so supportive and encouraging. And my parents were, of course, supportive of her. They still say to this day, she is the best thing that ever happened to me.
Despite all the differences between my dad and Chip, Dad knew that he had a good heart, and he saw something in Chip that he knew was right for me. People say opposites attract, and I think the fact that Chip and I were together for anything beyond a first date proves that point pretty well. But the fact that we stayed together goes to something a little deeper. The fact that we were opposites on the surface didn't negate the fact that we both were raised by loving parents and loving families, and that we both love our families dearly. Our roots were important to both of us, and that one common bond, to me, plays a big role in what has kept us together.
Not that we're perfect in any way. I mean, don't get the wrong idea. There were times when we would fight like cats and dogs, and Joe's tough, but there was just something about her. We'd always work through it. Whatever stupid mistakes I made, and there were plenty of stupid things that set her off, we'd find a way to get through it, and we'd wind up being even closer to each other than we had at the beginning, every single time. Joe was more perfect for me than I ever could have imagined. After we'd been dating about a year or so, I honestly couldn't imagine my life without her. So I decided to do the traditional thing, and I went and asked Joe's mom and dad for her hand in marriage. Honestly, that was one of the best days of my life. I couldn't have been more nervous, and they could not have been more supportive. And as soon as I was over that hurdle, I started planning a way to surprise her and ask her to marry me in a way that she'd never forget.
Chip told me he'd been invited to a private concert, and he asked me if I wanted to go. He was vague about what kind of music it was or what this concert was all about, but I didn't care. I pretty much wanted to go anywhere Chip wanted to take me. Okay, great, he said. Well, you've got to get really dressed up, and it's in Archer City. I knew that both of Chip's parents had gone to high school in that sweet little town, which was the setting for Larry McMurtry's famous novel, The Last Picture Show, and the movie of the same name starring Sybil Shepherd and Jeff Bridges. The old theater that inspired the book and film was still there, and I knew they had concerts in that venue from time to time, so nothing seemed unusual about Chip's request, even though we would have to drive 4 hours to get there. I honestly didn't suspect a thing. I was just excited. We wound up rolling into Archer City at about 7 o'clock that night, but instead of pulling up near the theater, Chip pulled into this little shopping center and drove us around to a door in the back. "Chip, where are you taking me?" I asked. "Just come on," he said. He was all smiles. I was thinking, well, this must be a super private concert. He took me into this unmarked hallway, and at first he seemed like he was lost, as if he was trying to figure out where he was going. Then all of a sudden, Chip fell down to one knee and sort of wobbled to one side. I thought he was having a heart attack or something. "Chip, are you okay?" I said.
I was wearing this pea coat. You know, it was cold outside. So I went to kneel down. My knee pinned the bottom of my coat to the ground so I couldn't sit back up straight. I had to put my hand against the wall so I could lean and get the jacket out from underneath myself.
Then he looked at me. I realized he was down on one knee on purpose. He got real calm, and he took my hand, and he said, "I want to spend the rest of my life with you." I was in total shock. Even more so than I was on my dad's driveway basketball court when Chip first said, "I love you." Oh my goodness was the only thing I could get out. I was so taken aback and so happy, but so confused. Chip, I said, kind of giggling and giddy at the whole thing. Babe, why are we doing this in the hallway? Chip got a funny smile on his face, a smile I'd never seen before, and he said, well, knock on the door. We were standing beside an unmarked door in that unmarked hallway, and I could not figure out for the life of me what he was up to. I shook my head and went ahead and knocked, and the door opened. Behind it stood a man who looked like Geppetto from Pinocchio, wearing a leather apron and a magnifying visor on his head. Welcome to my jewelry shop, the man said. You're here to design your ring. I just about melted. The shopping center was closed, so we had the whole store to ourselves. The jeweler was a man named Billy Holder who had gone to high school with Chip's dad, and they'd worked this whole thing out in advance. The fact that the selection of the ring tied back to Chip's roots and family history made it all the more special for me. I couldn't get over the fact that Chip had arranged all of this just for me. When did he have the time? How did he keep it all a secret? I basically got the chance to sit and sift through Billy's entire inventory of diamonds and settings and pick my engagement ring right there on the spot.
I gave her the pick of any $80 diamond she wanted.
He's kidding. His budget was actually quite a bit more than $80. We joked about that, though, because my dad had only had $80 to spend on my mom's engagement ring, and she'd loved it anyway. But as soon as they could afford it, she upgraded. But I was so happy. I think I would have been happy with an $80 ring if that was all Chip could afford.
Sure, if you were the one to pick it out. Even back then, I was smart enough to know that you were very opinionated. If I'd gone and picked out the ring myself, I could literally have seen you going, hey, I really do love you, and you and I are going to work out fine, but there is no way that's the ring that I'm going to wear.
Oh, and just to clarify about my answer to Chip, at some point after saying, oh my goodness, I did say yes. Chip said his mom had loaned him some money, so I was able to get something really special. We didn't have tens of thousands of dollars to spend, and thankfully we weren't buying diamonds in Beverly Hills. I was able to pick out a nice round diamond and a beautiful antique-looking platinum setting. I had a blast sitting there with Billy, designing the perfect ring. Chip just sat there, patiently observing every second of it. After we finished designing, Billy said he would need some time to work on the ring, so he gave me a substitute to wear for the time being, just for fun. It was a great, big, gaudy, fake diamond that he'd put together so I'd have something to show off to my friends and family. Your parents are going to go crazy wondering how much money you spent on this, Billy said to Chip with a laugh. There was no private concert that night, but Chip did have more in store for me. From Billy's shop, we drove over to this cute little Archer City hotel for dinner. My parents, my little sister, Chip's parents, and his sister were all there waiting to celebrate our engagement with us. There were all sorts of hugs and tears of joy that made that night the most perfect night ever, and of course they were all taken aback by the size of my diamond. It's funny to me that even back then, they all seemed to realize that a flashy ring just wasn't my style. They expected to see me wearing something a little subtler, a little smaller, a little more classic maybe. But we strung them along for a good long while, and we all had a good laugh when Chip finally revealed that the ring was fake. 12 years later, we had the opportunity to invite Billy Holder out to the farm for our anniversary party. Chip surprised me that night with a 12-year anniversary strand of pearls that Billy hand-delivered to me, and we had the cameras there to capture the whole moment. It aired as part of our third season, but what the cameras didn't show was the moment we went back to the farm and found Billy sitting on my front porch holding a selection of diamonds on the black velvet tray. Chip wants you to upgrade, he said to me. My engagement ring? I said. Yes, he knows you love the setting, but he wants you to be able to pick out a better diamond like your mom did.
That first diamond was beautiful, but it was really simple in nature. It was all I could afford back then, but at this point, I really wanted to do something nicer. Something bigger. So I told Billy to bring me some options so we could replace it with something else. I thought of it as an investment of sorts. I really wanted this one to be perfect.
So Billy showed me all of these beautiful diamonds and told me I could have my pick. That's supposed to be every girl's dream, right? But I looked at him in the eye and I said, I'm sorry, but no. This is the original diamond I picked, and it's perfect just the way it is. It wasn't a perfect diamond, but it was perfect for me. I felt bad that Billy wasn't going to make the big sale he was hoping for that day, but I don't ever want to replace that diamond or that ring. To me, my ring is part of our story. If I looked down at my hand and saw a more expensive diamond in that setting, it somehow wouldn't fit. I would know that we couldn't have afforded that diamond back when we first got engaged. The story wouldn't add up. But this ring with this diamond, the one I wear every day, this ring fits. When I look at it, I remember picking out that very diamond on the night of our engagement and looking at it through the little magnifier. I think about the look on Chip's face when he looked up at me in the hallway, and inevitably, I can't stop myself from thinking of where it led us 6 months later, our wedding.
Thank you for spending time with us, and we hope you enjoyed this episode of Listen Here. Check back next week for more audiobook samples and maybe a special guest or two. Follow us wherever you listen to podcasts, or find us on Instagram and TikTok at Listen Here Podcast. Visit our website, listenhearepodcast.com, for more information or to find the books we've talked about. See you next week.